Hello and welcome to episode number 267. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner, and you are listening to one of our premium episodes, so thank you for your support of the Project Management Podcast. Your subscription fee helps us pay for our expenses, and occasionally also buys a pizza for myself and my wife. In just a moment, Roland Dumont-Duvoitel and I will be delving into the topic of how an enterprise PMO, an EPMO, needs to take the perspective of two worlds. That is to say, the EPMO needs to look at both projects and project management as well as the ongoing business. And that the EPMO needs to break down and organize both so that they can each become an integral part of the company. Too often, however, this is not part of what the EPMO does, and when it is part of its services, then unfortunately the task often fails. So please join us in the discussion of what functions an EPMO generally fulfills, why it does indeed need to extend its focus on integrating projects and ongoing business, and how it can be done well. And don't forget that Roland will be speaking on April 29th at the 2014 Project Zone Congress in Frankfurt, Germany. So if you hear this before April 2014, you can find out more at projectzonecongress.com. And now, let's bring all of this together for some savvy integration. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview.
Today with Roland Dumont-Duvoitel, Managing Partner and CEO of Amontis.com. Hello, Roland, and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast.
Hello, Cornelius.
Today, we want to discuss the topic of integrating projects and ongoing business. And your argument is that this is something that an EPMO should be doing. So let's start at the very beginning. What is an EPMO?
Well, first of all, in general terms, an EPMO is an enterprise-wide project or portfolio management office. So a portfolio management office with a scope for the enterprise, business-driven, strategic, so highest level.
And what are the fundamental differences between a simple PMO and an EPMO?
Well, we have different definitions and levels. The lowest level is more a project office, just temporary support for a project manager. And then you have the differences of being permanent as a support for some line managers. Then you have the level of being permanent, but in a separate entity that is really a second to the line responsibility or department head. And an EPMO is something like an entity, permanent, that is on top management level, and in my vision should be at least as well staffed and as mature as is the board of a company.
And what are generally the functions that you see in such an EPMO?
Well, in general terms, there are always three basic functions that are, it is one, to be a sort of center of excellence, delivering trainings, coaching, knowledge, consulting support, etc. The second is delivery functions, so doing capacity planning, doing resource planning and management, doing contract management, facilitating a number of things. And the highest then, or the primary, is then to be portfolio manager, supporting or to develop strategies, prioritizing projects, programs within the portfolios, looking for the governance and giving governance support, etc. So these are certainly the three major functions of an EPMO.
And when we talk about integrating of projects into the ongoing business, what are the problems that you generally see that companies are faced when they're doing that?
Well, I think it's quite funny. When you look at a company, you have, in fact, black and white, sure, two worlds. The one world is the ongoing business. That's what we learn at university. That's what is managed perfectly because things you know, you could really detail them in your planning, in your structures. So you have structures in place, you have job descriptions, trainings, and everything in order to perform the ongoing business. If you look at with the same level of detail into project management, you see that the second world of temporary work that is meant to support innovation, change, transformation, well, overall to guarantee the future, there are bits and pieces here and there. It is not coherent, not consistent. You have project managers that work with different standards. You have here and there a permanent and continuous PMO. You have on different level this support. And in fact, it is not really consistent on how you manage, how you detail all these things. You never would work in an ongoing business with a bookkeeping system that allows every department to have its own definition of its profit and loss statements and different balance sheet items, etc. But you allow this in this other world of temporary project down to the governance and everything. And then so far, if you look at these two worlds, on one side, you need to separate them in order to understand to what extent they need to be structured in their environment. And then the problem is to integrate the two. Now, if you integrate the two, the question is what is the role and responsibility of the line management? What is the role and responsibility of the project management? Who is in charge of the future? And so far, there's a lot of problems that need to be clarified and sorted out and solved in order to have coherent and consistent worlds of temporary and ongoing business, and as well have this integrated so that they work together again for one company and for not for different orientation.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we have this rigor on one side in the finance department, as you have said, but on the other side, for all the projects that we do, we're kind of loose and we let everybody do their own thing?
I think because we don't learn it differently at the universities or at school. You learn everything about your ongoing business and you learn individual project management, and this is just very superficial. And when you start your career, projects are something meant to prove yourself, to learn how to manage things in a as Prince, project in controlled environment. So in a controlled world, you can try to show that you're a good manager. And then once you were successful, you will be promoted to a line business, and you never want to go back to projects anymore because line managers are the career path. Line managers are really the owner of sources, resources, are owner of the company, not the project managers. And so far, it is a career thing and based on something that we learned not well enough. Although in our world and in the future, I think more than half of everything we do is not ongoing business. It is a temporary something. Most of them may be called projects, others are maybe just organizing things around an event or so that it could be a project. But in any case, more than half of what we're doing is certainly a project type, more project type than an ongoing type of business.
In an email, you wrote to me that when companies attempt to integrate projects into and the ongoing business, then that generally fails. Why do you say that?
It fails, one, because still most of the companies have not the right understanding about the magnitude of what project management and organizational project management means. So that's one thing. The second is also because once an executive is on arriving at the top, he fears to become transparent regarding his own weaknesses and deficiencies and prefers to work in his political silo power thing instead of being open for cross departmental activities. And insofar, from top, there are quite a number of managers blocking the thing in addition to not understanding what we're talking about.
When it comes to integrating projects and business, there is also a second dimension, and that is towards the end of the project, when you are trying to integrate the project result and the ongoing business. So we've done the project work, now we have a result, now this has to be integrated into our business so that it becomes daily work. Is this part of the discussion that we are talking about here?
It's part of the discussion as the responsibility for the EPMO as an ongoing responsible and being in charge of integrating all these lessons learned. There's nothing else but project where you really learn a lot of new things. That's one of the characteristics of projects. And so far, EPMO or PMOs have the responsibility to integrate this on a continuous basis. The individual project is more in charge to get its power right to generate value for the customers, to be visible and empower and deliver what he should do. And he should not benchmark with companies or other projects that ride dead horses. But it's not an issue of a single project. It is more of this project landscape and how you get the maturity of the organization right to live in this more and more dynamic environment and in a world that is more characterized by elements that are typical for project and not for ongoing business.
So if we stay at the EPMO level and we're trying to ensure that we integrate the project work into our business and how we do our projects, what are the steps that we need to go through on a high level in order to plan this kind of integration?
Well, there are different ways in doing that. If you look on companies who dealt with this problem, you can develop in a more academic way, first of all, the ground. You train people, you develop PMOs coming bottom up, and then try to get this maturity based on a good formation, education, etc. I strongly believe that you need something that we call the throwing a bomb. You start immediately at the top, high level, and show to the rest of the organization that you mean what you say, so that you adapt it on a top level. And that means that you try to integrate all these functions together with your strategy functions in an organizational unit that is a real partner to the board, and that the board members stick to the rules and regulations of going through this entity if they want to change, transform, innovate something, and not mixing this with their daily routine. Once they give this sign top down very quickly, you can change the organization very easily. It is much more the other way around, that people are trained in a number of things, being very performant project managers, but understanding exactly that the top management is not really open to their world and to this kind of managing issues. And in so far, I strongly believe that starting with throwing a bomb, starting from top down, proving with your first steps on the top is the most important things to do. And so far, it's a top management issue, and we're lacking that. The funny and interesting thing is when you look into the literature of strategy and strategic management, you find no word about project management. And if you look in the project management world, except the word strategic support, you read very little and people know very little about what strategy development and strategic management is all about. And that's quite curious because these two worlds belong together.
So how difficult then is it to convince management of the need to actually do this?
It's a long work. It was very interesting to see that in the management turnaround jobs that I had, where I was myself in the position of being board member or the president, it was quite easy because I had this knowledge and I could establish this unit and treat them as equal on that base and try to form them, develop them. Then it works. So the hindering thing is really to find someone in top management that accepts that this approach, this transparency, is worth for doing it for everyone. I have a good example here in Germany. I had to work for them in France for a turnaround situation, and was able to convince the board and also to get the support of a unit that was called business development, responsible for strategy, merger acquisition, all this stuff, and to get their interest in adding to their strategy work also the translation into portfolio, and then to control this thing and being the guidance for the rest of the organization doing then the projects, in putting this landscape of needs and mass of projects and prioritization together. And since it works in all of Europe, at least, that all the presidents of the different entities know exactly of what they are working for and how their own strategic objectives and projects fit to what the others do and how it fits to the whole corporation. And it shows that this works. So there are a number of good examples, and there are also others where, because the US companies are a little bit more advanced than German companies, where after a merger, the Germans were quite astonished to see that there is something like an EPMO or high-level PMO that all of a sudden was taking over some of this project and temporary ventures. And so far, they had a hard time to change their own culture, to be open to this and to adapt these standards. So you see the two in companies that are successful in their own, but you see that it's feasible if the top management accepts it, if you get support on the top level.
Who do you think should be the driver behind this to raise our understanding of the need for this? Is it the project management side who has to push for an EPMO? Is it management who has to push for an EPMO? Or is it we have to go back to academia, we have to go back to the schools, we have to teach this differently? Where do you start?
Well, I would say it's a multiple start. But within the companies, certainly there is no way other than going through the top management, to the board, for the simple reason most of the project managers, even the top ones in things such as EPMO, are very often not really the leaders. They're not of the managerial competence that you find in the board, being the doers, the leaders. They are more administrator, they're experts, they're high-level experts, but they're not really managing companies. And the difference I saw when I was called being such as a CPO, so a Chief Project Officer, to see the difference if you are one who managed companies, and then with this credibility, with this leadership style that you develop being in a line responsibility, to then be in charge of combining all the things in this portfolio and PMO environment. This makes the difference. So you need in the project environment people that had a success story in their line management in order to be trusted and to be accepted in this world of business-driven things. Most PMOs do not speak this business-driven language.
Is there a break even in a company where you say it doesn't make sense for companies who have fewer than, say, 100 people working for them? You have to have at least 250 people working for you when it makes sense to implement an EPMO and really talk about integrating project work and ongoing business.
The smallest company I introduced had something like 60 people. Is that an answer?
That is a very good answer. So it doesn't have to be a large company. We can already do this on a very small level then.
You can be very strategic and pragmatic at the same time. A small company is different, but has the same challenge as a big one. The difference is that in a big company, you have so many experts that you have a fantastic source of knowledge, but you have a very pragmatic competence in small companies. And they understand very quickly that with the support of a PMO, it's much easier for them to get an assistance from even lean management projects within the production and their production lines, down to the many things they have to adapt and change and transform every day in their organization. And they also in small companies, you continuously have to deal with projects. And to have someone in the organization who is really a master in this topic of project management is of great help, because a PMO that is really excellent is able to support even medium competent project managers. Well, if you don't have a good PMO, you need always 100% good project managers, which is much more difficult than having at least one excellent guy supporting the others.
All right, then. Here's my last question for you regarding this topic here. So our listeners, they have now understood where the problem is. They know, oh, I just see my company doesn't do this. We do not have consistency in integration of this. They're project managers. They are working on their daily projects. What can they do to drive this forward? Where can they start to move into this direction?
They could try to form a community of all the project managers and then try bottom up to coordinate these things and then standardize, prioritize, etc., and help to develop at least the tool base for something that could help the upper management to find the right way. For the rest, it's not really a bottom up. It must be top down.
All right. Roland, thank you very much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Cornelius.
And that was Roland Dumont-Duvoitel with the EPMO and how it needs to integrate projects with ongoing business. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. If you are a PMP and you're certified and you want to earn 37 PDUs quickly and for less than $5 per PDU, then try the Agile Prepcast. The Agile Prepcast not only prepares you for the PMI ACP exam, but it also qualifies for 37 PDUs. Log on at agileprepcast.com/PDU for the details. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Change is not made without inconvenience, even if you go from a really bad situation to a much better one. Until next time.